The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched beyond what human eyes could easily measure. Thousands of species gathered here, each representative standing in their designated space. Some floated in special atmosphere bubbles. Others stood on platforms adjusted for their gravity needs. The noise was constant, a mix of clicking, humming, and sounds that no human throat could make. Deho stood in the human section, his dark suit simple compared to the elaborate displays around him. He was young for an ambassador, barely 40. But Earth had sent him because he understood something important. He knew how to listen before speaking. The emergency session had been called 3 days ago. A species called the Talari was dying. The hologram at the center of the hall showed their world. It was beautiful, covered in crystal formations that caught light and threw rainbows across pale blue skies. The Talari themselves looked like living glass, their bodies transparent and delicate. Even in the recording, Deho could see how fragile they were. "They cannot fight," the council speaker announced. His voice was translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "The Talari have no weapons, no defense systems, no military capability. They are being hunted." Another hologram appeared. This one showed massive warships, dark and brutal in design. The Vectros Empire had been expanding for decades, taking world after world. They killed or enslaved every species they encountered. Now they wanted the Talari homeworld for its rich mineral deposits. "The Talari have fled twice before," the speaker continued. "Each time they abandoned their world and searched for a new home. Each time the Vectros found them again. They have nowhere left to run." Around the hall, representatives began to murmur. Deho listened carefully to the translations flowing through his earpiece. "Evolution is harsh," one delegate said. "Species that cannot defend themselves do not survive. We cannot fight the Vectros Empire for every weak species they encounter," another added. "Where would it end? The Talari should have developed weapons long ago. Their pacifism is their own fault." Deho felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his face calm. He had learned this skill during his years in diplomacy. "Show emotion at the wrong time and nobody listens to your words." The speaker called for a vote. All those in favor of intervention? Silence filled the hall. Not a single delegate raised their appendage or activated their voting light. All those in favor of allowing natural selection to proceed? Thousands of lights appeared. The hall glowed with approval. The Talari would be abandoned. Deho pressed his communication button. "The human delegation requests to speak." The speaker looked surprised. Humanity was still considered a junior species in the council. Barely 2 generations since first contact. "The floor recognizes Earth. Humanity volunteers to protect the Talari," Deho said clearly. The silence that followed was different this time. It was the silence of shock. Then the laughter started. It began as small chuckles and grew into roaring amusement. Delegates who had been arguing moments ago now found something they could agree on. The idea of humans as protectors was hilarious to them. "The humans?" someone shouted between laughs. "They have no natural armor, no venom, no telepathic abilities. They are soft creatures who die easily. How many worlds has humanity defended successfully?" Another mocked. "Oh yes, only their own, and they nearly destroyed it themselves several times." Deho waited for the laughter to die down. He had expected this reaction. "We may be soft," he said quietly, forcing the hall to go silent to hear him. "But we volunteer anyway. Will anyone else?" No one answered. The laughter faded into uncomfortable quiet. The speaker processed this development. "The council will accept humanity's offer, but understand, Earth, that you will receive no assistance, no reinforcements, no rescue if you fail. The Talari are your responsibility alone." "Understood," Deho replied. The session ended shortly after. As the delegates dispersed, many of them glanced at the human section with expressions that Deho's translator described as pity. They thought humanity had just signed its own death warrant. 3 days later, Commander Minji stood on the bridge of the HSS Defender, watching the planet Crystallis grow larger on the view screen. 11 other human ships traveled with her, a small fleet carrying barely 5,000 personnel total. Approaching orbit, her navigation officer reported. Minji was 35, a career military officer who had served on every human vessel in the defense fleet. She wore her uniform with pride, her short hair practical and neat. When Ambassador Deho had sent the mission orders, she had volunteered immediately. Her crew was less enthusiastic. "Commander, I need to say this." Jinho spoke from the tactical station. He was her oldest friend in the fleet. someone who had earned the right to speak freely. We are 12 ships. The Vectros Empire has hundreds, maybe thousands. This is not a fight we can win. Noted, Minji replied. Maintain course, Jinho sighed but obeyed. He knew Minji well enough to understand that once she accepted a mission, nothing would change her mind. The communication panel lit up. Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the surface. They are asking us to land and meet their leader. Prepare my shuttle, Minji ordered. Jinho, you have the bridge. Sora, you are coming with me. Medical Officer Sora looked up from her station. She was the youngest bridge officer, just 26. But her skills had saved countless lives during the mining colony disaster 2 years ago. Why do you need a doctor for a diplomatic meeting? Because I want them to see what humanity values, Minji explained. Warriors and healers together. The shuttle descended through Crystallis's atmosphere. The planet was even more beautiful up close. Crystal forests caught the sunlight and scattered it in millions of colors. Cities made of shaped crystal rose from the ground like frozen music. The Talari leader waited at the landing pad. Vela was tall and elegant, her crystalline body pulsing with soft inner light. When she moved, she made sounds like wind chimes. You are the humans? Vela asked, her voice surprisingly clear despite having no obvious mouth. I am Commander Minji of Earth Defense Fleet. This is Medical Officer Sora. Vela studied them carefully. Your species looks so delicate. Your skin has no armor. You carry no natural weapons. Why would you come here to die for us? Minji had been asked this question a dozen times since accepting the mission. She gave the same answer she always did. Because you need help and we can provide it. But you will die, Vela insisted. The Vectros are coming. They have already detected your ships. Our sensors show a large fleet approaching. You cannot defeat them. Probably not, Minji admitted. But we will try anyway. Vela's light pulsed in a pattern that Sora's translator interpreted as confusion mixed with grief. I do not understand your species. You choose to sacrifice yourselves for strangers. This makes no logical sense. Sora spoke for the first time. Maybe sense is overrated. We are staying. Please show us where we can set up medical facilities. When the fighting starts, both your people and ours will need care. That evening, as the human fleet established defensive positions around Crystallis, long-range sensors detected the approaching Vectros armada, 50 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than any human vessel. On the bridge of his flagship, Warlord Thrakos studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The humans had placed themselves between his fleet and an easy conquest. He would crush them first, then take the Talari at his leisure. Send them a message, Thrakos ordered. Tell the humans they have one chance to leave. After that, we destroy them. The message was transmitted. On the Defender, Minji read it and deleted it without responding. All ships, she broadcast to her small fleet. Battle stations. Make every shot count. Make them remember that humans stood here. In the crystal cities below, the Talari watched the human ships position themselves in orbit. They had never seen anyone fight for them before. They did not understand why these soft, vulnerable creatures would choose this path. But they would learn. The Galactic Council would learn. And the Vectros Empire was about to receive an education they would never forget. The Vectros fleet arrived like a storm. 50 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Crystallis system. Their hulls were dark metal covered in weapon ports. Each ship was 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Warlord Thrakos sat in his command throne, watching the tactical display. The 12 human ships looked like insects next to his armada. This would be over quickly. Open a channel, he ordered. On the Defender's bridge, Commander Minji heard the Warlord's voice for the first time. It was deep and rough, translated into words but keeping an edge of contempt. Human Commander, you have made a foolish choice. Surrender the Talari world and withdraw. We will allow you to leave alive. You have one of your Earth hours to decide. Minji looked at Jinho. Her tactical officer gave her a small nod. They had discussed this moment during the 3 days of preparation. Transmit our response, Minji said quietly. The communication officer pressed a button. The response was not words. It was the sound of human ships powering up their weapons. Thrakos laughed. So be it, all ships attack formation. Destroy them. The Vectros fleet moved forward like a wave of metal and death. Their ships outnumbered the humans 4-1. Their weapons had longer range and more power. Every tactical computer in both fleets calculated the same outcome. Human defeat in less than 30 minutes. But humans had stopped trusting computers centuries ago. Scatter formation, Minji ordered. Execute pattern broken glass. The 12 human ships suddenly broke apart in different directions. Some dove toward the planet, others angled up and away. 2 ships accelerated straight at the Vectros fleet. Thrakos frowned. What are they doing? This is chaos, not tactics. His tactical officer tried to lock weapons on the dispersing human ships. The targeting system struggled. Vectros tactics were built on organized battle lines and overwhelming firepower. They expected enemies to fight the same way. Humans did not. Pilot Hyunwoo commanded a small fighter squadron launched from the Defender. His 6 fighters were tiny compared to the massive warships around them, but that was their advantage. Stay close to their hulls, Hyunwoo transmitted to his squadron. Use their own ships as cover. The fighters dove into the Vectros formation like birds attacking a much larger predator. They flew between the warships so close that their wings almost scraped the metal hulls. When Vectros ships tried to shoot at them, they hit each other instead. Hyunwoo targeted the sensor arrays on a large cruiser. His weapons were small, but sensors were delicate. The array exploded in a shower of sparks. The cruiser went partially blind. That is for the Talari, Hyunwoo said quietly, then accelerated toward his next target. On the HSS Defender, engineer Nari worked frantically in the technical bay. She was 32, with grease permanently under her fingernails from years of working with ship systems. Commander wants the shield trick ready, her assistant said nervously. Tell the commander she will have it, Nari replied, her hands moving across the controls. Human shields were weaker than Vectros shields, but they operated on different frequencies. Nari had spent 3 days programming a special sequence. When activated, the 12 human ships would broadcast false energy signatures that made them appear as 50 ships on Vectros sensors. Activating now, Nari reported to the bridge. On the Vectros flagship, the tactical display suddenly showed 50 human ships instead of 12. Thrakos stood from his throne. What is this? Are they receiving reinforcements? Negative, Warlord. Sensors show 50 ships, but visual confirmation shows only 12. It appears to be some kind of electronic deception, Thrakos snarled. Then use visual targeting. Sir, at combat speeds and distances, visual targeting is extremely difficult. The Vectros fleet began firing, but their targeting computers were confused. Missiles launched at ghost images. Energy beams struck empty space. Some weapons locked onto the real human ships, but not enough. The human fleet was not trying to win. They were trying to survive and inflict maximum damage. Every ship had a role. Some drew fire while others attacked. They rotated positions constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Vectros to coordinate their overwhelming firepower. It was beautiful and desperate and completely insane. On the planet's surface, Medical Officer Sora had established a field hospital in one of the crystal cities. She worked with a team of 20 human medical personnel and twice that many Talari, volunteers who wanted to help despite having no medical training. Incoming, one of her nurses called. Out. The hospital shook as Vectros bombardment struck the city outskirts. The Vectros were trying to force the humans to surrender by threatening the Talari population. Several crystal structures collapsed and wounded Talari began arriving at the hospital. Sora moved from patient to patient. The Talari bodies were so fragile, simple fractures that a human might walk away from were life-threatening to them. Their crystalline structure meant traditional medical tools would not work. She had to improvise everything. Use the bonding compound, she instructed a nurse. It will hold the fracture together until their natural healing process starts. A young Talari child, barely waist-high, had been crushed under falling crystal debris. Her parent carried her into the hospital, their light pulsing with panic. Please, the parent begged. Please save her. Sora looked at the child's injuries and knew the truth. She did not have the tools or knowledge to save this patient, but she tried anyway. For 2 hours she worked, using every skill she possessed. The child died holding Sora's hand. The parents' light dimmed with grief, but they looked at Sora with something the translator could not quite capture. You tried. Even knowing you would fail, you tried to save a stranger's child. Who are you humans? Sora had no answer. She wiped her eyes and moved to the next patient. In orbit, the battle raged for 6 hours. It was the longest 6 hours of Minji's life. 3 human ships were destroyed. The crews died buying time for the others to reposition. The Defender itself took severe damage. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Main engines at 40% capacity, but the Vectros paid a price. 15 of their warships were destroyed or crippled. Another 20 had significant damage. Thrakos had never encountered an enemy like this. They should have been dead in 30 minutes. Instead, they were still fighting. "Warlord, our casualties are unacceptable," his tactical officer reported. "We have lost more ships in this battle than in our last 6 conquests combined." Thrakos stared at the display. The 9 remaining human ships were battered and smoking, but they still held formation between his fleet and the planet. "Order the fleet to withdraw," he said finally. "We will regroup and return with overwhelming force." The Vectros fleet pulled back, leaving the system. On the Defender, exhausted crew members cheered weakly. Minji did not cheer. She counted the cost. 3 ships lost, 743 personnel dead, another 300 wounded, and the Vectros would return. They had only won time, not victory. "Get me a damage report," she ordered, "and contact the other ships. I want casualty lists within the hour." That night, the Talari gathered in the largest crystal plaza. Fela stood at the center, her light bright enough to illuminate the entire space. Around her, thousands of her people pulsed with mixed emotions. "Today we witnessed something we have never seen before," Fela said. "The humans fought for us. They died for us, not because we are valuable to them, not because we could offer them anything in return, but simply because we needed protection." A human shuttle landed at the plaza edge. Lieutenant Taeyang and his ground combat unit emerged. They were there to provide security in case Vectros forces attempted a ground assault. The Talari had never seen human soldiers up close before. Taeyang was young, barely 24, but he carried himself like someone much older. His armor was scarred from combat training. His weapon was ready but pointed safely at the ground. "Do not be afraid," Vela told her people. "These warriors protect us." A small Talari child, braver than the rest, approached Taeyang. The child reached out and touched the human's armored hand. The soldier smiled and knelt down to the child's level. "Hello, little one," Taeyang said gently. The child's parent rushed forward, afraid but stopped when they saw the soldier's kind expression. In that moment, something changed in the Talari understanding. These humans were not just warriors. They were people who chose to be warriors so that others could be safe. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council monitored the battle through automated observation systems. The combat data was analyzed and distributed to all member species. In the council halls, delegates gathered informally to discuss what they had witnessed. The humans had not won, but they had survived against impossible odds. More importantly, they had chosen to fight in the first place. "Perhaps we judged them too quickly," one delegate admitted quietly. Another responded, "Or perhaps we judged ourselves too harshly. They remind us of what we used to be before we became civilized and cautious." But others remained unconvinced. "Wait until the Vectros return with their full fleet. Then we will see how long human courage lasts against true overwhelming force." On Crystallis, as the sun set and the crystal forests caught the last light of day, Sora finished treating the final patient. She stepped outside the hospital and looked up at 17 days after the first battle, the Vectros returned. This time, they brought 240 ships. The massive fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They did not approach Crystallis immediately. Instead, they formed a complete sphere around the planet, blocking every possible escape route Warlord Thrakos had learned from his first defeat. He would not underestimate the humans again. This time he would not attack. He would simply wait and let starvation do the work. On the Defender's bridge, Minji studied the tactical display with tired eyes. She had not slept properly in days. The ship repairs were barely holding together. Her fleet was down to 9 vessels and all of them were running low on supplies. "How long can we last?" she asked quietly. Jinho checked his calculations for the 3rd time, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They did not. "With strict rationing, we have supplies for 40 days. The Talari have resources for maybe 60 days. But their food production requires equipment we do not have spare parts for. So we have 40 days before we have to choose between starving or leaving." "Commander, we should request evacuation," Jinho said carefully. "Earth can send a relief fleet, but it will take at least 90 days to arrive." "We cannot last that long." Minji turned to look at her bridge crew. They were all watching her, waiting for her decision. She knew what the smart choice was. Request evacuation. Save her crew. Let the Talari face their fate alone. No evacuation request, she said firmly. We stay until the end. Jinho opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He had known Minji long enough to recognize that tone. Understood, Commander. I will inform the other ships. An hour later, Minji received responses from all 8 other ship commanders. The vote was unanimous. Every crew chose to stay. Back on Earth, Ambassador Deho stood before the Galactic Council once again. The Great Hall was quieter than usual. Everyone knew about the blockade. Humanity requests assistance, Deho said. We need supplies, reinforcements, or diplomatic pressure on the Vectros Empire to lift the siege. The council speaker processed the request. The council sympathizes with humanity's situation. However, intervention would require a majority vote. Does any species wish to propose such action? Silence filled the hall. Not a single delegate spoke. A reptilian delegate named Orvath finally broke the quiet. His species was known for pure logic without emotion. Ambassador Deho, I must ask a question. Why did humanity choose this path? You knew the risks. You knew the probable outcome, yet you volunteered anyway. For what purpose? Deho looked around the hall at thousands of species, all of them watching him with curiosity or pity or contempt. He took a breath and spoke from his heart. Because someone has to care, he said simply. In all of this galaxy, with all its power and technology and wisdom, someone has to look at the weak and defenseless and say that their lives matter. That was us, that is us. And if we die for that choice, at least we die knowing we tried. Orvath tilted his head, processing this. Emotional reasoning. Not logical. Maybe, Deho agreed. But it is human. The council voted. The result was the same as before. No intervention. Humanity stood alone. On Crystallis, the siege continued. Resources grew scarcer each day. Engineer Nari worked miracles keeping the ships functional with dwindling spare parts. She cannibalized 3 damaged fighters to keep 2 operational. She rerouted power systems in ways that no manual recommended. She barely slept. The main reactor on the Defender is failing, she reported to Minji on the 14th day of the siege. I can keep it running, but not at full capacity. We will have to reduce life support to minimal levels. Do what you need to, Minji authorized. The temperature on the ships dropped. Crew members wore extra layers. Some compartments were sealed off entirely to conserve power. They shivered but did not complain. On the surface, relationships between humans and Talari deepened. Pilot Hyunwoo spent his off-duty hours with Vela, teaching her about Earth. He showed her recordings of oceans and forests and cities. He told her about humanity's long history of war and peace, destruction and creation. Your species has hurt itself so many times, Vela observed, watching a documentary about human conflicts. Why do you keep making the same mistakes? Hyunwoo smiled sadly. We are not a perfect species. We fight among ourselves. We damage our own world. We create weapons that could destroy everything we love. But we also create art and music and stories. We explore and dream and protect those who need protection. We are complicated. I think I am beginning to understand, Vela said. You are a species of contradictions. You can be violent and gentle, destructive and creative, selfish and sacrificial, all at the same time. That sounds about right, Hyunwoo agreed. The Talari began to change. They had never known warriors before, never seen anyone willing to fight and die for others. Now they saw humans doing exactly that. Young Talari started asking questions about courage and duty. They wanted to learn how to defend themselves, even though their bodies were too fragile for combat. Engineer Nari spent hours teaching Talari technicians how to reinforce their shelters and repair their equipment. The Talari learned quickly, their crystalline minds processing information in unique ways. You are good teachers, one Talari student told Nari. You are good students, Nari replied.
Keep learning.
When we are gone, you will need these skills. The student's light dimmed with sadness. We do not want you to be gone. On the 21st day of the siege, Lieutenant Sunho proposed a desperate plan. There was a Vectros supply depot on a small moon 3 light hours away from Crystallis. If a small team could raid it, they might capture enough supplies to extend the siege by several weeks. It is a suicide mission, Minji said bluntly. The depot will be heavily defended. You will be flying through a blockade of 200 ships just to reach it. Yes, Commander, Sunho agreed. But what choice do we have? Minji looked at the young lieutenant. He was 26 years old. He should have been building a life, not planning suicide missions. Choose your team, she said finally. Launch at 0300 hours tomorrow. Sunho selected 12 soldiers for the raid. They flew in 2 small assault shuttles modified to be as quiet as possible. The plan was to slip through the blockade during a shift change when Vectros' attention was divided. The flight through the blockade was terrifying. Twice, Vectros' sensors almost detected them. Twice, they drifted silently past warships large enough to destroy them with a single shot. After 4 hours, they reached the supply depot. The facility was defended by 50 Vectros soldiers. Sunho's team had the element of surprise but was outnumbered 4-1. The attack was brutal and efficient. Humans used the depot's tight corridors to neutralize the Vectros size advantage. They fought room by room, taking casualties but never stopping. Sunho personally led the assault on the main storage area. A Vectros guard shot him in the shoulder. He returned fire and kept advancing. The wound was bad, but he ignored it. His team was counting on him. By the time the depot was secured, Sunho had lost 6 of his 12 soldiers. The other 6 were wounded, including himself. But they had captured 3 cargo containers full of supplies. Getting back through the blockade was even harder. The Vectros knew about the raid now. Warships were actively searching. One of the assault shuttles was detected and destroyed. All 4 soldiers aboard died instantly. Sunho's shuttle made it back to Crystallis with the 3 containers. The supplies would extend their survival by maybe 3 weeks. 6 lives traded for 21 days. Sunho stood in the medical bay while Sora treated his shoulder, and he wondered if the math was worth it. It was worth it, Sora said quietly, reading his expression. Those supplies will keep people alive. Both human and Talari. You did what needed to be done. 6 people are dead because of my plan. 6 people died protecting others. Sora corrected gently. There is a difference. They knew the risks. They chose to go anyway. On the 35th day of the siege, Vectros intelligence intercepted a transmission. It was encoded, but their computers broke the encryption within hours. The message revealed Thrakos' next move. The Vectros had developed a biological weapon specifically designed to kill Talari. Their crystalline biology was unique, and the weapon would shatter their bodies from the inside. Importantly, the weapon would not harm other species. The planet would remain habitable for Vectros colonization. The weapon was housed on Thrakos' flagship. It would be deployed in 72 hours. Medical Officer Sora received the intelligence report in her field hospital. She read it 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. She had not. She went to find Commander Minji. The commander was inspecting damaged hull sections, checking if they could hold together for a few more weeks. She looked exhausted and old beyond her years. Commander, we have a problem, Sora said quietly. Minji listened to the report without interrupting. When Sora finished, the commander stood silent for a long moment. 72 hours, Minji said finally. We need to destroy that weapon. The weapon is on the flagship. In the middle of 200 warships. Commander, there is no way to reach it. Then we find a way, Minji said firmly. Call a meeting of all senior officers. We have 3 days to solve an impossible problem. We have done it before. We will do it again. That night, as human officers planned their desperate assault on the flagship, the Talari gathered in their crystal. The meeting lasted 18 hours. Every senior officer from all 9 ships gathered on the Defender through holographic connection. They argued, calculated, and planned. The problem seemed impossible from every angle. We cannot fight through 200 ships to reach the flagship, Jinho said for the 5th time. Our entire fleet would be destroyed before we got close. Then we do not fight through them, Minji replied. We distract them, make them look somewhere else while a small team infiltrates. Pilot Hyunwoo leaned forward in his holographic display. Commander, I have an idea. It is completely insane, but so is everything else we have done. He explained his plan. The room went silent as everyone processed it. The silence stretched for almost a minute. That is the most reckless thing I have ever heard, Jinho said finally. Then he smiled. It might actually work. The plan was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. The entire human fleet would stage a full attack on one side of the Vectros blockade. They would throw everything they had at the enemy, creating the largest distraction possible. During the chaos, a small team would use a captured Vectros transport to slip through the confusion and dock with the flagship. Once inside, they would locate the biological weapon and destroy it. Then they would escape if possible, die trying if necessary. I need volunteers for the infiltration team, Minji announced. Every single person in the meeting raised their hand. Minji selected 3 people: Tactical Officer Jinho, because his combat experience and technical knowledge were essential; Pilot Hyunwoo, because his flying skills gave them the best chance of reaching the flagship alive; and Private Yuna, a 23-year-old computer specialist who had served quietly throughout the siege, but whose hacking abilities were legendary among the fleet. The rest of us will provide the distraction, Minji continued. We attack in 60 hours. That gives us time to prepare and say our goodbyes. The meeting ended. Officers returned to their ships to brief their crews. Everyone understood the truth. The distraction attack would likely destroy the entire human fleet. They were not just buying time for the infiltration team. They were sacrificing themselves. Over the next 2 days, humans wrote letters home. They recorded messages for families they would never see again. Some cried. Others laughed at old jokes. A few simply sat in quiet contemplation. Engineer Nari worked on the captured Vectros transport, modifying its systems to appear legitimate on enemy sensors. She barely slept, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. When the transport was ready, she sat in the cargo bay and wrote a letter to her sister on Earth. I am sorry I will not be at your wedding, the letter said. I am sorry for many things, but I am not sorry for being here. What we are doing matters. Remember that. Make sure Mom knows I was not afraid at the end. Make sure Dad knows I did my duty. She sealed the letter and added it to the communication drone that would be launched toward Earth if any humans survived. On the surface, Medical Officer Sora spent her final days treating patients. She knew she would not survive the coming battle. The field hospital would be left in the care of Tilari medical staff she had trained. You are leaving, Vela said, finding Sora outside the hospital late one night. Yes, Sora admitted. Tomorrow. You will die in space while we remain safe here, Vela said softly. This is not fair. You should live. We should be the ones to die. Life is not about fairness, Sora replied. It is about choices. We chose to protect you. That choice means something even if we fail. Vela's crystalline body pulsed with light. If we survive this, we will remember you. Every human who stood here. We will tell our children and our children's children. We will make sure your sacrifice matters. Thank you, Sora said simply. That is enough. Lieutenant Taeyang and his ground forces prepared to defend the Crystal Cities if the Vectros attempted a surface assault during the chaos. He inspected weapons, checked defensive positions, and tried not to think about the fact that he would never see Earth again. A young Tilari child approached him, the same one who had touched his hand weeks ago. The child offered him a small crystal flower, grown in the beautiful gardens that the Tilari cultivated. For protection, the child said in halting human language. Magic. Taeyang accepted the gift with a gentle smile. Thank you, little one. I will keep it safe. On the Vectros flagship, Warlord Thrakos inspected the biological weapon personally. It was a beautiful piece of destruction, housed in a crystalline container that seemed fitting for killing a crystalline species. How long until deployment? He asked his science officer. 48 hours, Warlord. Once released into the atmosphere, the weapon will kill every Tilari on the planet within 3 days. And the humans? They will be unaffected. Though by then, they will be too weak from starvation to matter. We can destroy them at our leisure. Thrakos smiled. Victory was close. The humans had fought well, better than any species he had encountered. But courage was not enough against overwhelming power and patience. The attack began at dawn on the 3rd day. The 9 human ships powered up their remaining weapons and accelerated toward one section of the Vectros blockade. They transmitted no threats or demands. They simply attacked with everything they had. Commander Minji stood on the Defender's bridge as her ship charged into the enemy formation. All weapons free. Target anything that moves. Make them focus on us. The Vectros fleet reacted exactly as predicted. Warships moved to intercept the suicidal human assault. Weapon systems activated across 200 vessels. The humans were throwing themselves at the enemy with desperate fury, and the Vectros responded with lethal efficiency. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first 10 minutes. The remaining 6 continued their attack, spreading out to threaten as much of the blockade as possible. They were everywhere at once, forcing the Vectros to divide their attention. In the chaos, a small Vectros transport drifted through the confusion. Its identification codes were legitimate, pulled from the captured vessel's database. The transport requested docking clearance with the flagship. Approved, the flagship's traffic controller responded without really paying attention. He was too busy coordinating defensive fire against the human attack. The transport docked. 3 humans emerged wearing stolen Vectros armor that engineer Nari had modified to fit human bodies. The armor was uncomfortable and too large, but it provided enough disguise for a quick glance. Jinho led the way through the flagship's corridors. His hand was on his weapon, hidden under the armor. Beside him, Hunwoo carried scanning equipment disguised as a maintenance tool. Yuna followed last, her computer pad linked to the ship's network through a wireless hack she had initiated during docking. "Weapons storage is on Deck 17, Yuna whispered. "We are on Deck 42. We need to go down." They moved quickly through the massive ship. Twice they passed Vectros crew members. Both times the aliens ignored them, too busy with battle stations to question 3 figures in proper armor. On Deck 17, they encountered security. A checkpoint with 4 guards and biometric scanners. "This is where it gets difficult," Jinho said quietly. He drew his weapon. Hyunwoo left side. "Yuna, stay back and hack the door." The fight was brief and brutal. Jinho took down 2 guards before they could raise an alarm. Hyunwoo eliminated the 3rd. The 4th guard managed to activate a warning signal before Hyunwoo's 2nd shot killed him. "We have maybe 3 minutes before security forces arrive," Jinho estimated. "Yuna, how long to open that door?" 2 minutes, she replied, her fingers flying across her computer pad. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Jinho and Hyunwoo covered both ends of the corridor, weapons ready. They could hear boots running in the distance. Security was coming. "Door open," Yuna announced. They rushed into the weapon storage room. The biological weapon sat in its crystalline container on a central pedestal. It was beautiful and terrible. "How do we destroy it?" Hyunwoo asked. Yuna studied the container's control panel. "There is a self-destruct mechanism. Built-in safety feature. I can activate it, but the explosion will destroy this entire section of the ship. How long until detonation?" "Minimum safe timer is 3 minutes. Then we have 3 minutes to escape," Jinho said. He looked at the door where security forces were gathering outside. "Except we are trapped. We will never reach the transport in time." The 3 humans looked at each other. They had known this might happen. The mission was always about destroying the weapon, not about surviving. "Set the timer," Jinho ordered. The door exploded inward. Vectros security forces poured into the room, weapons raised. Behind them, Warlord Thrakos entered. He had come personally when he learned about the intrusion. "Humans," Thrakos said with a mixture of respect and contempt. "You have reached the weapon, impressive. But now you will surrender it and face execution." Yuna's hand hovered over the self-destruct activation. Thrakos saw the gesture and understood. "You have armed the self-destruct," he observed. "Clever, but if you activate it, you die. Surrender now, and I will allow you to live as prisoners. You have fought well." "You have earned that much," Hyunwoo laughed. It was a tired, genuine laugh. "Warlord, you do not understand humans at all. We were already dead the moment we volunteered to protect the Talari. We just get to choose what we die for." The Vectros retreat was not orderly. Ships fled in different directions, their formation broken by fear and confusion. Some tried to attack the remaining human vessels on their way out. Others simply ran. Within 6 hours, the entire blockade was gone. Commander Minji stood on the defender's damaged bridge and tried to process what had happened. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won, but the cost was devastating. 5 ships destroyed completely, over 3,000 human personnel dead, another 800 wounded, many critically. The 4 remaining ships were barely functional. The Defender had hull breaches on 12 decks, main engines offline, and life support failing in 3 sections. "Get me casualty reports from all ships," Minji ordered quietly. Her voice was rough from exhaustion and grief. Jinho was gone. Her oldest friend dead in the explosion. Yunwoo, who had shared stories of Earth with the Talari. Yuna, barely older than a child. All gone. The list of names seemed endless. Pilots she had trained. Engineers who had kept the ships running through impossible conditions. Medical staff who had died treating patients during bombardments. Each name was a person with a family, with dreams, with a life that ended far from home. On the planet's surface, Medical Officer Sora emerged from the hospital she had refused to leave during the battle. The crystal city around her was damaged but standing. Teleri were gathering in the streets, their lights pulsing with joy and grief mixed together. Lieutenant Taeyang approached her, the crystal flower from the Teleri child still tucked in his armor. Medical officer, the commander requests all senior staff report conditions. The hospital is functional, Sora replied mechanically. We have 216 wounded, 38 critical. I need supplies and assistance. Help is coming, Taeyang assured her. Then more gently, Sora, we survived. You can rest now, but Sora could not rest. There were patients who needed care. She returned to the hospital and continued working. Rest could wait. Grief could wait. People needed her. The Telari leader Vela stood in the largest crystal plaza addressing her people. Her light was brighter than usual, strong enough to cast shadows in the perpetual dawn. Our protectors have sacrificed everything for us, Vela said. 3,000 humans died so that we could live. They did not die for resources or territory or power. They died simply because we existed and needed help. Around her, thousands of Telari pulsed their lights in a pattern that meant mourning and gratitude combined. They had no word in their language for what the humans had done. They would need to create new words. We will build a memorial, Vela continued. We will place the name of every human who died here. We will teach our children about this day. We will make sure their sacrifice is never forgotten. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Great Hall was filled with delegates, but the mood was different than before. The mocking laughter was gone. In its place was uncomfortable silence. Ambassador Deho stood in the human section. He looked older than he had 45 days ago. He had lost weight, and his eyes held a depth of sadness that came from receiving casualty lists. The council speaker addressed the assembly. The siege of Chrysalis has ended. The Telari survive. Humanity has fulfilled its commitment. A long pause followed. Delegates looked at each other, uncertain what to say. Finally, the reptilian delegate Orvath spoke. I wish to propose a resolution. The Galactic Council should formally recognize humanity's actions. More than that, we should learn from them. Other delegates began to murmur. This was unexpected. I have analyzed the data, Orvath continued. Humanity faced impossible odds. By all logical calculations, they should have failed. They succeeded not through superior technology or physical power, but through determination and willingness to sacrifice. They demonstrated a quality that many of us have forgotten. What quality is that? The speaker asked. Compassion enforced by action, Orvath replied. We feel sympathy for the weak. We debate their fate. We vote on resolutions, but we do not act. Humans acted. They looked at a species they had never met and chose to die rather than let them be destroyed. Another delegate stood. The Vectros Empire is still a threat. If humanity can stand against them, others might follow. The discussion continued for hours. Proposals were made and debated. Finally, a resolution was put forward. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity as Protectorate Guardians, the speaker announced. This title grants them authority to intervene when defenseless species face extinction. Furthermore, Council members are encouraged, though not required, to provide assistance in such interventions. The vote was called. This time the response was different. 2/3 of the Council voted in favor. Deho felt tears on his face but did not bother to wipe them away. On behalf of humanity, we accept this responsibility. We only ask that others remember what it cost us to earn it. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Species that had refused to help now sent aid. Medical supplies arrived from a dozen worlds. Engineering teams volunteered to help repair the human ships. Food and materials appeared in quantities that dwarfed what humanity had requested. The tide of public opinion across the galaxy had shifted. Humans were no longer seen as weak or foolish. They were seen as courageous, as protectors, as people who lived by principles instead of just talking about them. The Telari offered their most valuable resource in gratitude. They had learned to manipulate crystalline energy in ways that other species did not understand. This technology could improve human shields, weapons, and power systems. They offered it exclusively to humanity as thanks. You have given us so much more, Vela told Ambassador Deho when he visited Chrysalis. You gave us hope. You showed us that courage exists in the universe, that kindness can be backed by strength, that the weak do not have to live in fear if the strong choose to be guardians instead of predators. On the planet's surface, construction began on the memorial. It would be the largest structure the Talari had ever built, made entirely of crystal that caught sunlight and threw rainbow colors across the entire city. 3,026 names were carved into the crystal. Each name glowed with inner light, powered by the same energy that gave the Talari their life. The memorial would shine for thousands of years, a permanent reminder of those who had stood between darkness and innocence. The inscription at the base was simple. They stood when others looked away. They fought when victory seemed impossible. They died so that strangers could live. Remember them. Honor them. Be worthy of their sacrifice. Commander Minji attended the memorial dedication ceremony. She stood with the 3,000 survivors of her fleet, all of them wearing their damaged uniforms with pride. The Talari filled the plaza by the tens of thousands, their lights pulsing in respect. "I do not have words for what I feel," Minji said when asked to speak. "We came here to do a job, to protect people who needed protection. Many of us died doing that job. But I look at this city and see Talari children playing safely. I see families together. I see a species that will continue to exist because humans chose to stand in the way of their destruction." She paused, looking at the memorial with all those names. "That is enough," she continued quietly. "That has to be enough. Because if it is not enough, then what did they die for?" Engineer Nari had survived, though she lost her left arm in a hull breach during the final battle. She stood near the memorial, running her remaining hand over the carved names. She found the names of 3 engineers who had worked under her command. "Good people, friends, we did it," she whispered to the names. "We held the ships together. We kept them running until the end. You did your job. Rest now." Medical Officer Sora had worked 36 hours straight treating wounded after the battle ended. She had saved hundreds of lives, both human and Talari, but she had also lost patients. She remembered each one. A young Talari approached her during the ceremony, the same child whose parent had died in the hospital weeks ago. "Thank you for trying to save her," the child said in careful human language. "She knew you tried." She was grateful. Sora knelt down and hugged the child gently. Talari were fragile, so she was careful. "I wish I could have done more." "You did enough," the child replied. "You cared. That matters." Lieutenant Taeyang and his ground forces had defended the crystal cities throughout the siege. They had taken casualties but held their positions. Now they stood at attention during the ceremony. The crystal flower from the Talari child displayed on each soldier's armor as an unofficial badge of honor. Back at the Galactic Council, changes began to happen. Species that had ignored calls for help started to reconsider their policies. Protection became a topic of serious discussion. The concept of Protectorate Guardians expanded beyond just humanity. 3 other species volunteered to join humanity in the role. Together they formed the Guardian Alliance, dedicated to protecting defenseless species across the galaxy. Ambassador Deho addressed the Council one final time before returning to Earth. "You asked why humans guard the defenseless," he said. "I will tell you again, because this answer matters more than any other. We guard them because a universe where the strong abandon the weak is not a civilization. It is not a society. It is not worth preserving. It is just a jungle among the stars, where might makes right and compassion is weakness." He looked around the great hall at